afraid of the dark.
I have a summer cottage inherited from my grandfather when I turned 24. It's located in a tiny village. Back then, there were slightly more people there than there are now. It was November '96. My wife and I were traditionally preparing the house for winter, closing shutters and tidying up inside. My wife forgot her wallet there, containing some valuables. We didn't have a car, and the buses only ran twice a week, in the morning and evening. I had to take the evening bus to retrieve her wallet. I stepped out onto the deserted bus stop, snow falling heavily. Behind me, the forest loomed, and I felt increasingly uneasy walking towards home, so I quickened my pace. The house seemed gloomy and cold, as if it wasn't mine at all. After searching everywhere, I found my wife's wallet on the shelf, where she had hastily left it while packing some things into her bag. I locked up everything and hurried to the bus stop. By the time I finished searching, it had gotten even darker, and there was a lot more snow, making it feel like an eternity had passed, even though I had only been in the cottage for about 5 minutes. At the bus stop, I lit a cigarette. The clock showed that the bus would arrive in about 7 minutes. But after 7:15 and even 30 minutes, there was no sign of the bus. I stood there for another hour, trying to understand what had happened. We didn't have mobile phones back then, and the nearest landline was at the post office, about 6 kilometers away from the village. After waiting for a miracle for about an hour, I slowly headed back to the cottage because I was freezing. I wanted to warm up and figure out what to do next. Before reaching my property, I saw a light in the neighboring house. I decided to knock, hoping someone could help, although it seemed strange to me that someone had started living in a previously uninhabited house. I knocked. A man in old clothes and boots, unshaven with a cigarette butt between his yellow teeth, opened the door. I explained to him that I missed the bus. The man looked at me with surprise, as if I were some kind of miracle, cleared his throat, and in a raspy voice, explained to me that the buses only ran once a week on Saturdays. Anyway, I didn't bother to check the schedule at the time. I just asked him how he could help me. I had to get to work the next day. The man agreed to take me to the nearest village, where there were trains to the city and the only telephone was at the post office. While he was getting ready, he invited me to warm up and have a shot of vodka. I looked around his house. It was quite poor, and there was a tear-off calendar on the wall dated March 2nd, 1970. I was surprised why he hadn't thrown away such an old thing. Maybe there was something special about that date. We rode in a horse-drawn cart, and on the way he told me about some old man named Gray, with whom he used to enjoy drinking vodka in the evenings, but now he was in the hospital with pneumonia. This man took me to the edge of the forest, and then there were lights. He said I could easily walk down the hill, but he had to go home. I didn't recognize the area at all, or maybe it just seemed that way because of the darkness and snow. Anyway, while I was looking at the forest, the man disappeared. I was surprised that he had left so quickly on his cart. I didn't even have time to thank him, which was a pity. I walked quickly so as not to freeze, watching my step. In the distance, I could occasionally hear trains passing, and later I got on a train and went home. But when I got home, another strange thing awaited me. My wife was in tears, hugging me and scolding me because, as it turned out, I had been gone for 2 days. She didn't believe my story at all, and only after smelling the vodka I had drunk 2.5 hours ago at that man's house did she scold me for another week. In the spring, as soon as we arrived at our summer house, I immediately went to the neighboring house to find the man to thank him and show my wife, who had helped me then. But the house remained abandoned as before. I asked the old-timers who had lived in the village for years whose house it was, and they said that a certain Bill used to live there, but he died about 20 years ago. He was good friends with my grandfather. They liked to drink vodka together. At that moment, everything became clear to me. My grandfather's name was Gray, and his close friend lived nearby. I even remembered the man who sometimes coughed heavily and smelled strongly of tobacco. I have a wonderful friend, my classmate Victor. We've been friends since the first grade, and even when we started our own families, we never had a celebration without him. In 2005, he and his wife bought an apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom on the 12th floor of a 13-story building. The renovation was excellent, and they lived happily and harmoniously until something terrible happened in 2007. At 11 p.m., they heard a loud argument from upstairs. It was their neighbor Gregor again quarreling with his wife. I didn't ask for details about their problem, but that evening there was banging, breaking glass, and who knows what else coming from above, as if a hurricane was raging, and Gregor's wife was cursing him furiously. Victor and his wife were getting ready to dive into the world of dreams, despite the noise from above, when suddenly something heavy crashed from above, grazed their balcony railings, and something bulky thudded onto the pavement below. Their hearts sank as they rushed onto the balcony and saw their neighbor, unnaturally twisted, lying on the asphalt in the light of the lantern. Then there were interrogations, investigators, funerals. Gregor's wife left to stay with her mother somewhere very far away, locking up the apartment indefinitely. Victor and his wife were coming to terms with what had happened. But that wasn't the end of it. About 6 days after the funeral, already in a half-dream state, Victor heard the noise from above again. Through sleep, he thought that the neighbors were quarreling again, but then he heard crying. Quiet male sobbing with heavy sighs. As he started to wake up, Victor realized that the apartment upstairs seemed to be empty, or was the sound coming from somewhere else? He woke his wife. She also heard the heavy male sobs. Stepping onto the balcony, they began to look around. It seemed like everything was quiet, when suddenly both clearly heard a weak male sigh and the words, "Oh fool, what a fool I am." Paralyzed with fear, they both dove into the room, closed all the windows, drew the curtains, and didn't sleep, listening to the male moaning all night right above them. It happened again the next night, and it didn't stop for a week. Something was clearly happening in the apartment upstairs. And when Victor's wife went to ask the neighbor who lived in the apartment next to the vacant one, she was invited in and told what she knew about the crying and sighing the late Gregor. One night, she also went out onto the balcony in search of the source of the sobbing. The sound came from the neighbors. The curious neighbor leaned out and peeked onto the neighboring balcony there. In the corner, in a pile of some dark debris, she saw Gregor sitting on the floor, hugging his knees and sighing heavily. The neighbor drank valerian for a long time, and in the morning she ran to the nearest church. There, she was told that suicides could linger, and since Gregor wasn't properly buried, it couldn't be. The neighbors stocked up on holy water and candles and generously sprinkled the walls separating her apartment from the vacant one, so generously that even the wallpaper peeled off the wall. She also advised Victor and his wife to do the same. In general, they still live in that apartment to this day, having gotten used to these phenomena, which fortunately have become less frequent. The apartment still sits vacant. Gregor's wife tried to live there herself, then rent it out, and even sell it, but tenants don't stay there for long for understandable reasons, and buyers still haven't been found. And I wonder, how long did Gregor linger in this world?